Hey, hello everybody. We're back again with another short lecture on waiver of juveniles for our class and to include in our discussion. You know, in the early days of time, there was no juvenile court. So everybody, no matter what your age, was tried in adult court, okay? The one thing is, though, that way back in time, there was a decision by common law in England that if you were under 8 years old, you were not competent to be tried for a crime because you're just too young, you didn't understand the difference between right and wrong at all. And there's been a trend since then. There's a case called Roper versus Simmons that was, I believe it was decided in 2005, that basically said, you know, that if you're under 18, you're basically not developed enough to make good decisions as an adult, and therefore you cannot get the death penalty, okay? And then another decision that came like after that was that basically to get what we call LWOP, which is life without parole. In other words, no opportunity to be rehabilitated, to ever redeem yourself. You're just going to be in prison for the rest of your life. You know, it's interesting, a lot of people don't know this, but life in prison doesn't really mean life in prison. I mean, I've seen cases where guys have gotten out of prison in 14 years, you know. So just life is equal to 14 years, you know. It's actually, a guy can get out of prison if he's a law-abiding citizen while he's in prison. He can actually get out quicker than if he's been charged with armed robbery or something, which a lot of times is 25 years. So it's kind of weird, but you could contribute to the murder of an individual, get the life sentence, and be out in 14 years. And in regard to an armed robbery, it could take you 25 years, you know. So it's kind of a weird situation there. And these are the kind of things that people complain about all the time. So basically, recent case says juveniles cannot get LWOP, okay? So keep in mind what we mean by LWOP is life without parole, or basically a real life sentence, okay? Never see the outside, never walk free out in society. So I'm saying all this as kind of a background to the next thing that we're going to talk about, and that is the waiver. So beginning in around 1900 in Chicago, there was a lot of work in Chicago in the area of social work at the University of Chicago. They tried to help people in poverty. A lot of immigrants were there from like Germany, Central Europe, places like that, working in slaughterhouses, steel mills, you know, dirty, nasty jobs. And this goes way back, we're talking 19th century here, we're talking after the Civil War. None of these people were working as wage slaves, even though we said we did not have slavery in this country anymore. They've made so little money, and they worked such long hours that they were not that much different than a slave. So what would happen is their kids would run the streets and get into trouble. And so the number of different people in the University of Chicago working in social work, sociology, what we call applied sociology got involved. And also then this is kind of the very beginning stages of a criminal justice program. So Talcott Parsons, a number of these early thinkers developed, you know, these ideas that there should be a juvenile court. So beginning around 1900, we start to see the development of a juvenile court, and Okay, that's the first juvenile court was in Chicago, okay, and that's pretty common information. You know, of course, then prior to that, there was a concept called probation that came out in the early 1800s. So, and that was in Massachusetts, and that was a single individual actually who stepped forward. His name was Augustus, John Augustus, and he said, I will take some of these young criminals home with me, and I'll feed them and I'll teach them a skill as a cobbler. And so he was a cobbler, but he was also a devout Christian, and he decided that he was going to make a difference. He said he felt like he'd been told to do this, so he started taking these young people home, teaching them to be a cobbler, setting them up in different other parts of town to be a cobbler, and letting them go out and live law-abiding lives. And so he had huge success in helping people get rehabilitated. It's just purely private, nonprofit attempt on his part to help people in need. And they said out of all the cases that he did, which was in the hundreds, he only had a handful that didn't pan out, because he was giving them an education, teaching them a job skill. And I think this same basic thing that we saw with these teenagers when John Augustus started probation way back in the early 1800s has carried through to today. It's the one consistent thing, is that, you know, education, training, counseling, you know, trying to treat somebody with care and respect, you can win them over for good, you know. And there's a current example of that. This guy, the machine gun preacher in Pennsylvania, is a good example, where once you start straightening your life out and going out and helping other people, taking care of your family, helping others and so forth, you no longer really have time to get in trouble. So these are some things that were going on. But now to the dark side of all this, what's happened in the recent past, which I'm out of black ink again, I can't keep up. In the recent past, the idea of waiver to adult court has come into vogue, and this I would say since about 1980. And you know, the thing on this is that there was a kind of a myth that circulated, and it was that, you know, we've got some teenagers that are basically you know, benighted and bad, and there's no redemption for them. And a lot of this has come up as we went along in some of the things that we're seeing from you in your discussions, as that, you know, there are these individual cases, but, you know, those cases are so rare in the solid stream of people that come through that just need a little care, a little attention, and some rehabilitation, and they can be turned around. But what happens when you get into this waiver situation, basically you're saying, we're giving up on this kid. Juvenile court has nothing to offer him. And so, you know, the kid gets turned over. And I say him because the vast majority of waivers involve boys, not girls. You know, so Florida especially jumped on board with this and believed the myth. What you find out about Florida is they have a lot of elderly people, and these people live in unremitting fear. And so they bought into this. And so what they did is they shifted the burden of waiver from the judge, whose job it was up until then to make a decision about waiver. And a lot of times what you needed in order to have a waiver was basically probable cause that an adult felony has been committed, okay? Okay, so you need a PC adult felony, okay? So you've got to have some evidence. Probable cause is some evidence that an adult felony has been committed by this kid, okay? Okay, then the next thing is he has to be above a certain age, okay? So there's like a point of no return age, okay? That number could be 14 in some states, some of them's 15, some of them 16, you know. And so I know a lot of them, it's automatic when they're 17. When you're 17, you're already going to adult court. There's no option. It's not 18 anymore for a lot of places, it's 17. So if you're above the age of no return, you've got probable cause that there was an adult felony. And here's the biggest one, and this is where I used to really struggle, is that there is no hope for rehab, okay? So there's no hope to help this kid turn his life around, okay? This could be proven by, you know, well, this is his third felony offense as a juvenile, okay? We've tried and tried, we've tried everything. We tried probation, we tried counseling, then we put him in a foster home, we put him in a group home. None of these things have worked. So we've tried basically everything that we can do. You tried to help him, no luck, okay? And so basically with all that in mind, you know, then the judge basically has more or less a duty to waive this young man into the adult system, okay? Could be a young woman, but that is extremely rare, okay? So basically, some evidence that the person committed the crime, they're above age. Remember that it has to be an adult felony. In other words, you cannot waive someone to an adult court for a misdemeanor. You know, like sidewalk spitting, you cannot get waived, okay? Another thing we used to see a lot is runaways, curfew violation, unruliness. What's unruliness? I mean, you have to be able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, and there has to be intent, just like with any other adult. One of the things that you see is when the case gets shifted from juvenile court to adult court, the legal standard goes up, because just like what we said in trials, it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And a lot of times, even though it's supposed to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt in juvenile court, it's still kind of a relaxed standard in a lot of places, that if somebody says it's true, then we're going to assume it's true, and that boy is going to boys' school. Take In-Ray Galt, for example. And so basically what you get into on these waivers is, you know, basically that's the judicial waiver. Well, Florida then shifted the waiver process to the prosecutor, okay? And the prosecutor can decide, you know, who gets waived to adult court. They never see a juvenile court, never see a juvenile judge. No juvenile judge involved, okay? And so what ends up happening a lot of times is, you know, there's a lot of injustice, because these kids get no treatment, okay? Do not, you know, pass go, go right to jail, no $200, you go right to jail, you know. So basically they get no treatment, they get dumped into the adult system. Interestingly, the length of sentence in adult prison for a juvenile, since this is their first adult offense, a lot of times is shorter than the length of time they actually spend in help these kids learn how to weld, and they'll be set for life. And so this is a lot of the things that we really need to do. Another big area, I think, instead of waiver as an alternative, is preventative type programs. One of the preventative type programs that I think really works goes clear down to Head Start. There's a Highscope program, Highscope, that started up in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and it is, you can Google on this, you can find a ton of information. This has been a longitudinal study, and what it's saying is that if you have enrichment programs for very young children, we're talking 4, 5 years old, okay? These kids will actually flourish, and they will not commit crimes, okay? Will not resort to crimes. What they did, they've studied these kids for 40 years that they put in this program in the 60s, studied it all the way up to 2004, and they've proven categorically that they have a much higher degree of success as workers, as parents, and they do not resort to crime. Many of them are law-abiding, work in a lot of very good areas like the government, things like that. And so this Highscope program is a very good alternative. In other words, invest the money in the very young children that are in need of supervision, parenting, and this type of things. And a big part of Highscope is not just always focused on the kids. Some of it is on the kids, but a lot of Highscope is spent working with the parents to try to make them better parents. So I've kind of gotten off track a little bit by talking about Highscope, but I think it's a fantastic program. There are some other prevention programs out there. Even people later in life, 18, 19 years old, that have been in trouble basically their whole life, that have gone into like a community college or even any kind of a college, online colleges, different kind of things that are available. Which the problem we have is a lot of them can't get aid because of drugs in their record. But if they don't have drugs in their background, they can qualify for financial aid and they can better themselves. And the odds of somebody with a college education resorting to crime is very low. So basically what we're seeing is help people get their education. It's a much better investment than waving these kids into prison and ending up with what? A worse criminal, because all they do is they go into prison, they learn bad things, how to be a better criminal, which is a worse person, and be just a drain and a weight on society, instead of going in and getting enrichment that they need, education, counseling, the things that they really need to become a productive citizen. So that's my take on it. Hope that you enjoyed this little lecture. It's just a place to start. You can do your own research. Try to keep an open mind, look at this, and tell us what you think in the discussion. Thanks a lot.